Yeah.
Hello and welcome everyone. It's great to have you here in this new edition of Deep Dive series where we invite former UX Design Award winners to share approaches, insight words, success stories in the UX domain. Also, if you're working on great UX, you can still submit until May 18 and be among our next winners. I'm Julia Dañate and I'm the project manager of the UX Design Awards, and now I will hand over to my colleague.
Hi, and I am Ake Rudolph. I'm leading the UX Design Awards and International Design Center Berlin, the awards organizer. And today we are really happy to host a presentation and talk about OtoKiosk, which is a winner of the product award in the Spring 26 awards. And a few words about why this product won the award. Well, the jury was pretty impressed about a variety of factors about how OtoKiosk actually helps people to overcome barriers of access, stigma, and even literacy, addressing the widespread issue of untreated hearing loss. So the jury was also convinced about the combination of very strong user research, very clear numbers, KPIs, and measurable year-over-year adoption stats. And this paired with a very strong focus on accessibility. And beyond this, OtoKiosk also demonstrates how you can harness AI technology in a very relevant way. More about this and about how an IA-based avatar interface enables anyone, almost anyone, to independently complete a hearing test, we'll be hearing in the next presentation. So, Julia?
Exactly. So to hear the story behind this product, OtoKiosk, we invite two key team members, Carlo Baruffini, who is a senior product owner, and Simone D'Alena, who is a senior product designer, and both at Amplifon. Also, if you have any questions, please share them via LinkedIn comments, or if you are in Zoom, you can also share them in the Zoom chat, and we will pass them to the speakers at the end of the presentation. Also, if you're in Zoom and if you would like to ask questions personally, you can also raise your hand and we will call on you. So that said, we are looking forward to hear more about OtoKiosk, and Carlo and Simona, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Ake. I'm going to be sharing right now. Please confirm I'm correctly sharing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clear.
Thank you. Then hello, everyone. I think Julia made a great introduction, but we're still going to try and deepen this a bit more about ourselves. I'm Simone D'Alena. I'm a senior product designer at Amplifon and I've worked on OtoKiosk for the past 3 years now. I've been a creative as long as I can remember, but this year it'll be 10 years since I've been immersed in UX design. It was since I started my journey at the Apple Developer Academy back in 2016, alongside Carlo, to say the least. So before we begin, I would like to thank you for, first of all, having us. We're genuinely grateful for having received this award and even more proud to talk about OtoKiosk here today. But before we get to the design side of things, I will let Carlo introduce himself and our product.
Thank you, Simona, and thank you all for being here. My name is Carlo Baruffini, and as Simone told you, I was part of the Apple Developer Academy in 2016, and that's when I started my career as a mobile developer. After that, I joined OtoHub, that was a startup focused on the development of medical device for the hearing care industry. And this startup in 2019 was acquired by Amplifon and created the Amplifon X research and development team that now we are part of it. And it's more or less 3 years now that I work as a product owner specifically for OtoKiosk inside the Amplifon X team. Today, I'm here to just introduce something about the product. Then I will let Simone to deep dive about the design challenges that we faced during the development of this app. But let's start from the basis. So what is OtoKiosk? OtoKiosk is an iOS-based application It's a medical device that is meant to be used by users to test their hearing in a simple and intuitive way. We are talking about a medical device. This means that this tool is not meant to be a screening test, but can give a diagnosis on your hearing. But it's a tool, a professional tool built not to be used by professionals, because OtoKiosk was born from the idea to give user the possibility to test their hearing in a few minutes without the need of a professional. In fact, OtoKiosk starts from another product called Autopad, that is the declination of OtoKiosk for the professional that are using it inside our stores to perform a full battery of tests during an appointment. OtoKiosk is taking all the tests included in Autopad, is simplifying them, and has created an intuitive and simple interface that can be used by anyone in a simple and intuitive way, as I said. So before deep in dive in OtoKiosk, maybe I need to tell you something more about Amplifon. We are a retail company spread all across the world in more than 30 countries with more than 9,000 stores. As I said, a retail company focused on the selling of hearing aid. And we, as a team of Amplifonics, we are focused on the development of digital tools that can enforce the ecosystem all around the hearing. Amplifon has more than 65 years of expertise and is spread all across the world with several different brands like Miracle Ear in the US, Bay Audiology in New Zealand, and several others. OtoKiosk can be used in several locations, and the purpose for us was to give anyone a simple tool to test their hearing, also in those situations where people are not so used to take a full diagnosis test or a full appointment. There is a lot of people that are facing the denial phase. They do not want to accept that maybe they have a problem. And OtoKiosk is a simple and easy and funny way to test their hearing without the stress of a full appointment with a professional. And we started using it in several locations, several different use cases. This year, we bring OtoKiosk in the European Parliament, and we did a lot of activities every year during the World Hearing Day. And now we deployed in shopping malls, pharmacies, hospital, and other venues. During the last years, we did more than 100,000 tests with around 1,000 installations in more than 12 countries. OtoKiosk, basically, it's a tool that Amplifon can use in several locations. As I said at the beginning, it's a medical device. This means that to give real efficient result, accurate result, it needs to be used with calibrated headphones. It's not a consumer app that can be freely downloaded from the App Store, but it's a tool used by Amplifon as a Swift knife to spread the hearing care awareness wherever and however it needs to. But it wasn't always like that. The one that you are going to see is a kind of version 2.0 of the old OtoKiosk that we created several years ago, that at some time needed to be redesigned to face new challenges. And that's here I'm going to let Simone tell you more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you. Well, he's absolutely right, because OtoKiosk used to be very different, but still effective. And it was especially thanks to the creative thinking of Antonio Curci, Gianna Lardaro, Anna Pondo, and many others who have worked on its first version. And the original OtoKiosk, in fact, shipped with the same killer feature that the most recent version has. So basically, in 2017, in fact, it did not rely on users figuring out a hearing test on their own. As you can see by the slide, there used to be a virtual assistant that guided them through the entire user experience. But in that first version, though, the assistant was a real actor. So it was a very, very problematic thing, because we had to film in front of a green screen with specific lines and audio cues. And then we would take the recording, and I remember our lead designer Anna used to key it out in After Effects, and it was such a headache. And then we would drop it into the app with some UI elements layered on top, and it was pretty complicated. So by some time, this product started just getting traction inside of Amplifon, and more people were interested in trying to leverage the tool to make something with it. So we started shipping different versions for different regions and different brands. We started from Italy, then we went all the way to Australia and United States with Miracle Ear. And as you can see, we used to have different actors, and it was a real pain to just go through every single step of the process to make sure that the deployed app would be using the new videos. Essentially, it was a way for us to make sure that the proper language and proper dialect was rightfully so spoken. And it was complicated because we needed to make keys. We needed to basically install the app again at every single kiosk, and it wasn't really that good. So we will we will try to say today that we were doing good, but in a way we felt stuck and we sort of hit a wall because we realized that processing this information was really hard for us because it required heavy customization. So since we hit that production wall, we realized that we could no longer continue shipping a product because the more we would suffer from being unable to serve users, and we wouldn't be as fast in doing so. So we came to the conclusion that a more polished product just doesn't fix bad architecture, but a better architecture would allow for a greater polished product. So perfecting our product's architecture and vision would benefit OtoKiosk's users' experience. And well, to simply put it, it would make it more usable in a way. So at this point, we knew that a redesign was necessary, but we decided to really think this through from the ground up, making the best of both service design and product design all together, and trying to manage our gain knowledge into a big overhaul that we prepared for a product. So to start preparing for that, we analyzed what we could do, and we started from technologies. So we redesigned our entire architecture and we started thinking what technologies would actually help us. So we started looking into how we could leverage what we were already using in different products, which is Token Studio, that in line with Style Dictionary is capable of producing real-time design tokens in production apps. We wanted to try and test Swift UI. It wasn't the first time we made a Swift UI application, but it was definitely the first time we tried to attempt at making a Swift UI application of this scope. And finally, Synthesia, which is what I'm going to be talking in a few minutes, because it's one of the, I would say, most controversial topics that we are talking about today, because it's basically AI-generated avatars that are capable of doing certain things. So at this point, we needed to figure out how to increase the likelihood that a more structured system would bring better UX. And since the speed of deployment was a bottleneck for us, we decided to widen how we would use this product. And as you can see, we started producing several kinds of OtoKiosk versions for different brands, but we would make it so that this would be so quicker through design tokens that it wouldn't be as much of a pain as it used to be in deploying different versions of the app with different media assets, because design tokens have helped us in leveraging this technology to the best. So we would be able to push media like logos and photographs and ensure that proper parameters per country would be met. But this is where our design system came into play and started growing more and more. And at that point, we realized we could use Synthesia, which is basically a product that could replace real actors with AI-generated assistants. But using this product and their technology would also let us generate lifelike speaking assistants on demand. So it basically killed the entire need of having to record actors in real time and in front of green screens, having to key them out in After Effects and all of that. All of that friction just came to an end. So we tried to implement these avatars directly in the app, but we oftentimes realized that in order to do so, we would need a bit more of a tool that allowed us to manage these avatars, because now that we have them, we can generate them. How do we make it so that an avatar just gets inside of an application and does what we want them to do? Because in this case, we have the ability to make them say certain things according to how we decided to do. And in order to be compliant with the cultural alignments and ethical needs of several countries that we push the app in, we would understand how this could be improved. And so we came up with a great idea that today is one of our most complex products, actually, which is a dashboard. You're right now looking at a wireframe of this dashboard from back in the day. So this became what we now know as the portal, the OtoKiosk dashboard, because we needed a way for iPads to be updated in real time so that we wouldn't need to deploy the app from scratch. So basically every single time we needed to update those same generated avatars, which were now easy to generate, but not so easy to maintain, we consequently decided to refer to these modules as scenarios. So we created basically a system that is called scenarios that contains modules. And these modules can contain several parts of OtoKiosk. So at this point, we wanted to take it a step further, and we started releasing this product in a fully usable form so that we not only ourselves can use it, but also other people from our corporate country or global market can come inside of the portal and create their own scenarios. So this has created grounds for having entirely different user flows and versions of OtoKiosk that would otherwise have required heavy manual customization for each deployment. And we can remotely create scenarios where each OtoKiosk has a separate and distinct user flow. And through setting up what we now call as modules, we would basically instruct the iPad to run a certain user flow. So essentially, it's more like the app doesn't have a standard user flow, which is pretty unusual. So just to give you a bit of a context, from the screen, you can see that the welcome screen module is the first one in line, and the thank you screen module is the last one in line. So we have a leading module and a trailing module, and in between those, anything can happen. So normally in digital apps, you would be able to predict that a fixed amount of routes can be taken for users to reach from point B to point A. But in OtoKiosk, this doesn't really happen because we need users to swim in a controlled environment. So we have them go through these modules, but in a dynamic way. So it's not like they're stuck in this exact specific flow. In fact, this can happen because we establish the simple rule of having a leading module and a trailing module. And for example, we can add more modules in between, like a data collection module, hearing aid simulation module. And based on our needs, we can make it so that users just run through this entire flow. But depending on the situation, this is dynamic as it goes because users can just try to do their thing. And at some point, things could happen because a logical conditional system that runs on the dashboard will allow you to basically ensure that any user that does certain things in the app, like takes certain actions, would resolve in having a different kind of flow. An example for this would be something that we do not normally ask, but for the sake of explaining the dynamic part of the logical conditions that we have on the dashboard, imagine that a user just enters a store or a mall and they want to take a test. They start the flow, they reach the questionnaire, and as soon as they hear or read an answer, a question, they may have to answer it in a certain way. So let's say, for example, the question could be, do you currently wear any hearing aids? And the users could say yes or no. In case they say yes, we would need no more hearing tests because they're wearing hearing aids. But maybe they were diagnosed with hearing loss previously. So we know for a fact that they have a previously diagnosed hearing loss, but they do not wear hearing aids. So based on whatever happens, we can make sure that the questionnaire is what creates the trigger to skip onto a different module. And this entire process is basically done on the dashboard. Our incredible front end and back end team have built this amazing thing where we can basically set up conditions and based on those conditions, receive certain actions. So in that case, with the example I just gave out, it would be something like if the user has answered question A in a certain way, and they also answered question B in a certain way, then this would happen. And this dynamic allows us to basically wire this information back in OtoKiosk's application through our own architecture, and it allows for relatively infinite modifications to the actual user flow. So in order to be compliant with new regulations and many other things that could happen in the meantime, like events or specific things, this system allows us to be pretty much versatile. That's the truest word to how this whole works, because being versatile in this case is key, and we are prepared for any scenario. In fact, Carlo is used to having a lot of relationships with people from other countries or markets and brands like Bayaudiology and French stores, for instance, and they all have been really happy with OtoKiosk, and they have been making several requests, and we can follow up on those requests fairly quickly. So this all gives us a good idea of what this app basically does, because it's made of several modules. And this means that the plethora of modules that we have are basically user interfaces that have a big challenge to face, which is they need to be able to switch whenever it's needed. Therefore, users must not feel like they're drifting away from the standard experience, because there is no standard experience to begin with. So what happens is we have, for example, a user interface for the ANL exam. This exam is basically structured with several objects, but all our exams and modules are basically made it so that the entire interface is grounded in minimalism and simplicity, because we need to use elevated objects and tooltips and subtitles and things that are interactive in a way that they can easily get out of frame in case we need them to. Because this dynamic system with logical conditions should treat each element as a non-anchored piece in a way that each module can be dynamically switched, so that it doesn't feel like you're going through a forced step. This was one of the biggest challenge, and it was possible to do because of our architecture, which was thanks to our senior iOS developer, Giorgio, who was incredibly fast in coming up with such a dynamic system to connect modules together based on whatever scenario the iPad would receive. So, for instance, we would have all the pieces of the puzzle together at this point, and several tests would be capable of running at the same time or separately. Because you see, OtoKiosk comes with calibrated headphones, as Carla said. So in case users need to take a test, because they could also opt out of the test without knowing so, for any reason. For example, they could reach the questionnaire at a point where a question is asked them about their age, maybe they're underage, then maybe we flag the scenario to make it so that if a user, based on the country regulations, is underaged, maybe they cannot take a test and they just get out. So this whole mechanism is why we decided to create a modular system and to make it so that AI assistants would only be present in the test phase. So a differentiation between the old version of OtoKiosk and the most recent one is that AI avatars are only present if the test begins, which happens because we've got sub-modules of the test that are basically ran inside of the application whenever we know that a test needs to run, which is called a pre-test phase, where users just wear their headphones and the avatar starts speaking. And we basically leveraged our design system to create a lot of these interactable elements, because we needed to have a way for users to feel like they were using actual things. We called this phygital because it needed to feel like they were touching something in as best we could. Unfortunately, Apple did not release an iPad that has haptic feedback yet. We wish it would happen so that we could also integrate haptic feedback into this, but we decided to make it so that these objects feel lifelike in a way, but still very focused on the interface and in brand. One of the biggest problems here was, in fact, that since we use proprietary algorithms for the digital in-noise test, the pure audiometry test, and different kinds of scenarios may bring the users to have these objects inside of the OtoKiosk, users would need to understand how they work, and that's why AI assistants can help us deliver the explanations to them. So we basically built the controls, but we have a big problem to face in this case, which is the differentiations where users usually have to face with OtoKiosk being separated onto different devices, basically, because the iPad is always present, but it's not always the case that OtoKiosk is used on the actual kiosk that we've built. In some cases and some venues and events, we use the simple folio from Apple or the iPad keyboard in case it's necessary. As long as we have an iPad and a calibrated pair of headphones, OtoKiosk can just run. So the idea here is that tokens that we've built are extremely important because users can be very distant from the screen based on certain contexts. So one thing that happens here is that because of Apple's regulations in kiosk mode, which is a mode that you enable in iPads so that users cannot get out of the application, we would need to basically use this feature and force the iPad to be locked. For this specific reason, users are not capable of going inside of their settings in the iPad and switching off their text size and things like that. So one of the issues we had to face was we needed to bring them to have an accessibility modules that basically allowed them to switch text size on demand. And this was only possible because of our studies on having, for example, a set of tokens that would dynamically scale objects and typefaces within the app based on the selected scale size. So using scale formulas, we can ensure that we can integrate these changes dynamically. And with this scalability in mind, no matter how much a proper experience you can have, you can be sure that you're going to have a great experience, because whether you are standing in front of the kiosk or standing in front of a smart folio, we try to ensure that you have all the tools in your hand to perform a test properly. A lot of our target user base are elderly, but not always, because it depends on the context of the actual scenario. There's times where we have several elder people try to test their hearing, and some other times even less elderly, like people in their 40s or 30s or 50s. And depending on the age gap, they can have an easier time or a harder time interfacing with OtoKiosk. So we have it at heart to create the best possible accessibility. And we truly do believe that throughout the user experience, the accessibility starts from outside of the screen. So it's from the very first moment that users interact with the actual product, and it's not just on screens. So we would like to underline this as a proper method to actually undergo medical barriers and break them, because a lot of people are just impaired in hearing, maybe vision, and impairments can be detrimental to people who are trying to figure out something for their life. And since this is a product that helps people, it's very important that it can help as many people as possible. In fact, we have a tendency for each of the Amplifon X products that we've built to run user tests. User tests have been very great for OtoKiosk. We have a lot of data that we have used to improve it. And the user tests that we've run have showed that all features were met with great enthusiasm and positive feedback. So essentially, we've had a great number of promoters and a decent number of passive, but we had almost 0 detractors in our NPS scale. And this came as a very great occasion to just interact with some users that are not predefined. A lot of times in Amplifon X, we build products with a great target in mind, but OtoKiosk is somewhat of an incomprehensible beast because we don't know who's going to interact with it. So being able to actually pull some people out for a test of different age gaps, different cultural backgrounds, we try to get the best out of the user tests that have helped us in shaping the most recent form of the tool. So with that being said, I wanted to take a couple takeaways, which are very important. We built OtoKiosk around certain rules, and to conclude, I'm not going to leave you with philosophical phrases or anything complicated, but any digital product, no matter if medical or not, it requires great architecture, and great architecture requires great context awareness, which will bring product care and vision. So being able to act and iterate fast on your user is more valuable than being slow on iteration and hard locked into a stance where you're not being able to move forward because maybe you decided to build and push a feature that just a few people will use. So understand your context, go and make something that is truly scalable for fast iteration, get a good grasp of what the product is and get a good care of it, and spread your vision out to all the possibilities, and make sure that accessibility and UX start outside of the screen. And most of all, don't be afraid to change, is what I would say, because we have completely destroyed the very old version of AutoKiosk, but we kept the most important part of it, which was its essence, its idea. And I think it's one of the best ways of redesigning a product to make it work with scalability in mind. So with that being said, I would like to thank everyone who have participated in making this product, all the teams that have worked with it, the front-end design team, the iOS development team. Special thanks to Giorgio Romano for listening to a lot of my complaints over the years, and obviously to Carlo, Anna, and many other managers who have worked in this. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Carlo and Simone. It was a really nice presentation and very concise that you took us through. So to everybody who's now following us live on LinkedIn, you can post questions to Simone and Carlo in the event comments. And if you're here live on Zoom, you can also use the chat or just raise your hand and join live with a question.
Yeah. So I would like starting asking you a few questions. And the first one would be a reason why tackle this challenge.
What was the idea behind the product?
In other words, yeah.
Or the goal,
I was on mute. I think Carlo can take this one if you want.
Yes, basically, as I said at the beginning, the idea was to go through the barrier of having your first approach with an hearing test, because there is the thing that we call in the sector stigma. There is a lot of people that do not want to test their hearing, and they do not accept to have maybe an issue. A problem, and we wanted to create something that is not invasive, that can be used in a really simple way. The challenge was to build something that was professional but at the same time simple, and that was our main goal, and it's still our goal during the development of every new feature that we develop for OtoKiosk.
So it's basically a kind of invitation for people to overcome the hesitation of going to a doctor, do a hearing test, but in a way playfully, understand, oh, there might be a need, and create awareness. It's not directly.
Yes. If I can add on top of that, the thing is, there are no strings attached to AutoKiosk. So basically the reason why this works is the moment you realize that you need to go to an actual hearing care professional to get your hearing checked, you probably already have a good idea that your hearing may be impaired in a way or worsened. Whereas AutoKiosk is just something that you may even bump into, and out of curiosity, you might find out that you have a hearing loss. So that's why the denial phase here is very important, because denial is what stops people from going into our stores or into any stores even to just get their hearing checked, or to even ENT doctors. Normally, you would just ask an ENT doctor to check your hearing and they would do so. But depending on the context, people that have their hearing worsen have a hard time accepting it because it's not something that you tend to realize.
Yes, you might not be aware even, because hearing degrades over time and not just from one to the other as well.
Yeah, I have a question that actually just pointing out something that you said in the takeaways slide, and you said accessibility and UX start out of the screens. And I don't know, I thought maybe it would be nice to hear more about it.
Of course. So to give you a brief context, the problem with accessibility in today's era is that a lot of people just stop at the digital side of it. Contrast, text sizes, But the thing is that if a product needs to be accessible, it needs to be accessible all around. So if someone came into a wheelchair, for example, and wanted to have AutoKiosk to work, we couldn't just pull the iPad out of the kiosk if it's needed because the real software is what matters here. So it doesn't really matter how we're affecting it. It's the idea behind the product itself and how you're proposing it to customers that entails the need of having a broadened vision out of accessibility. We're testing for colors as well because based on our brands, we may have some issues with people with certain color blindnesses um, to see the exact values that our test results may bring. So, for example, it doesn't really stop at color and contrast, but it also gets way deeper into understanding color theory, and it's a much broader aspect than just understanding the digital part of it because color theory depends on screen, illumination, context awareness of the room you're in, brightness of the screen, quality of the screen. It's a very complex world. And I hear a lot of people talk about accessibility every day. So we don't take it for granted here. So we try to make our best to ensure that we get a proper experience. And the distance that I was mentioning, the gap that there is between users who are interacting with AutoKiosk can differ. If you're using it on a smart folio while you're sitting down on a table, it's different from using it on the kiosk because you're standing up. Maybe the distance changes, and it's not to be taken lightly because elder people may have some motor issues. Even it's just moving their hands, trembling. There's a lot of issues there that needs to be taken into account. So everything needs to be qualified to make sure that everyone gets their shot at AutoKiosk, and that's our most important part.
So did you actually create the physical kiosk as well with accessibility in mind, with that you can lower it? Of course, the kiosks are placed in different locations, so you have very limited control about the environment as well. So this makes it even more difficult.
Back in the day, we used to believe that the kiosks were to be used with accessibility in mind, so they're kind of low. They're statistically low enough for anyone to just use it, but there are edge cases, and in those cases, the iPad can just be pulled out. And usually, in some installations, there's advocates and helpers that are there to help you. For example, in different shopping malls in Australia and even in other countries like New Zealand, where we've produced AutoKiosk in different brands, there used to be occasions where shopping malls would have, shopping assistants of people who would ask to get a hearing check, and there would be people to help there. So that's basically it.
Okay. Just like jump into more like this project setup, which phase you would say like was the most time consuming? Like research, testing, design? I don't know. Oh, you're muted. Yeah. No.
I have a good idea. I'm not sure if Carlo wants to take this one, but I do have a good idea of what it is.
Maybe both of you, one after the other.
Yeah,
I think
you can
it's
start.
the part about logical conditioning because it's the most overwhelming section of our dashboard. It's one of the hardest thing to grasp. It was hard to grasp first, and it was hard to build second. And it was because of the skills of our front-end design team and back-end design team that we would manage to make something so architecturally complex that actually does work. And it's not to be taken for granted that a Swift UI application can just take all that information and modularly modify itself. So UX also entails a lot of this because it's really about vision and the time it took to build that part. Yeah, it was quite overwhelming.
On my side, I can say that the hardest part is when designer and developers are together and need to build something together, because there is always the challenge. Luckily, the team, let's say, push one to another, and we are building something that is really, really great. But every time that we need to design a new feature, it's tough because anyone want to tell something, and I think that it's also why the product is so strong. We have a great team of designer, but also of technical people that can give a lot of insights to build something better. And yes, it's the difficult part, but it's also the best one.
I think you've touched on something very important here, which is about like building a methodology and a structure in which first you map the complexity, you create the use cases, the mental models, the structures, and then of course like a structure of the design development. Can you talk more a little bit about this? How you built the structure, starting from user research, then to imagination, structuring, and maybe a little bit about like the collaboration structure then in design development?
We were very lucky because we had a prior version of OtoKiosk that worked. So we knew how to tackle this because it was more about fixing issues rather than coming up with a great idea, because the idea was great from the start, but it had problems. And the biggest problem, as I said, was iteration. It was really hard to iterate. And so we used that as an anchor to understand what we could do to make it so that it would be easy on ourselves first to iterate. And that's the key, I think. That's what sparked the idea of making something that would be modular, that we could hand off to anyone and they would be capable of creating a completely separate and different user experience of OtoKiosk for the US market that may have their regulations and rules to respect compared to the European market, for example. We're not afraid to go to Asia. There's currently not an Asian version of OtoKiosk, but there might be one soon. I don't know. No spoilers here. But the problem was, in fact, coming up with a modular system. And that took a lot of research because we would need to understand the architectural structure first. And it was because of the interactions between design and development team being so strict together that we managed to make it work. The key there was just communication. There would be times where the design team and the development team would just be in a call talking for hours about how this would work. So it was more like continuous brainstorming, because inside of Amplifon X, we have a good methodology of trying not to overcomplicate on things and just talk and just be transparent and try to communicate our needs and ideas. And together we try to brainstorm until we have a vision, and then we turn that vision into requirements, and then we try to build things block by block. So that was how we tackled this.
Mm-hmm. A few words about user research, because that would be the basis that informs the internal Imagineering, right?
The different part of AutoKiosk 2.0 about user research is that we had a lot of data. So starting from the data that we took on timings that people used to have on, for example, on a single session, we gather data. We talked to a couple users that we would create by asking people to use AutoKiosk in a way, because the difference target is a problem. So we don't know who would use AutoKiosk. So we tried to make it used by anyone and to try and understand if they had issues moving around it, clicking on buttons. For example, one thing that went unmentioned is that we would not take for granted the idea that if placed in a mall, for example, we would need certain users to be attracted to it. So we built several kinds of waiting screens so that the first screen you see around the malls or airports is the most impactful one, so that you are attracted to it, because we realized that the first version wasn't really appealing to people. And the data we took was about timing. So we started with time frames and we looked at how much time it took for people to complete a run. And we would try to go from there and to beat that time with the modular system that would be severely more complicated because it might entail to have more modules. When that was over, we tried to have a user test on AutoKiosk 2.0, and we tried to see how users perceived it. We talked to them, we researched, and we made a lot of data tests on how much time they took for completing one module, for example, if they could complete bookings or if they could complete certain hearing tests. We approached it with a very, I would say we approached it in a very smart way because we didn't focus on making a user test for every single scenario OtoKiosk because it would be nearly impossible. So we tried to make it so that they would have an average version of OtoKiosk. Because what I'm trying to say is that if we put all modules together just to get users to test it,
Or maybe the core scenarios.
yes, if we put all modules together, people would probably feel exhausted because we can't just have them test every single module back to back. It would take several minutes until maybe they get bored. So the results would be severely influenced by the amount of time that it would take. So back in the user test days, we decided to have the most average one with a few tests that we knew were important back in the day, and we pushed them. One of our core concepts here is we have a good communication with our, with our markets and wherever your AutoKiosk is used. And because of the dashboard, we can collect data and understand if something is wrongfully happening. So we can interact with it as fast as we can and fix issues from remote, which is the most beautiful part.
Thank you. Carlo, we have a question from the audience for you. So now we want to hear the tough parts. Vedran Vrazalic, I hope that I spelled his name right, UX/UI designer, asks what were your biggest challenges for the development team from your point of view?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that what is real difficult every time is to understand and accept some feedbacks, because now that we are with AutoKiosk in several countries, we need to approach different peoples. And I think that during this call, there will be a lot of designers. And you know that people always want to tell something about design. Everyone thinks that they can do design. So sometimes we need to be still on our decision because they are made after months of research and development. But then we need also to understand when real feedbacks are telling us that we are doing something wrong. So we need to be open eventually to change our idea and update something in our product to make it better. So this is one real tough challenge. And another one is that every time that we develop a new feature, we need to be sure that this feature can be adapted to the different markets and different countries where we are launching it. Because if the request comes from one single market, then we need to not rush the development, but understand how to make it as general as possible to make it available for all, as I said, the markets and the countries where it's going to be used. So every time we need to stop a little bit and understand how to make the thing better. Last thing, I believe that is the one that Simone already spoke to you about. The biggest challenge in this product was the building of all the architecture to make the product works, because as you saw, the application is really, really simple in the interface, but behind it there is a really complex systems, and it was a huge challenge to face to make everything works so well.
Okay, thank you. Now I would like to jump into another topic, like more related to AI. And again, like related to challenges, and what was the biggest challenges in creating a smooth human AI avatar interaction?
I think
Connecting to this, did you find challenges, in terms of trust in the interaction, human AI, and what were the solutions you found for these?
I can say something about this before Carlo jumps in. And the most striking thing that I've seen, not to try and promote the product in, in a way that makes it look like AI can actually replace human faces and voices and feel and touch. but no one in our user research tests has said anything about the avatar, which was striking to me because I thought maybe someone would speak about it, but they didn't even notice. So I think that it's more about feeling like someone is there to talk you through it and under the underlying acceptance that bots and robots and people that are natively inhumane or call center bots, for example, are present. And so people may have a certain level of acceptance that may be there, but we didn't really ask. We just noticed that they didn't even bother.
Okay, no difference.
Yeah.
Mm. Now, honestly speaking, we saw a huge progress during last years of using Synthesia as a tool because at the beginning, the basis in English was really, really good, but for with other languages, you felt that was something that wasn't so good. But the improvements during the years were huge, and now in all the languages that we are using OtoKiosk, you cannot perceive that it's about AI, but you feel like it's a real person. So now we are real confident in every market we are launching OtoKiosk, even if we need to jump to another languages that is not English.
Okay, that's great to hear. So there is, in a way, emotionally no obstacles, you say, and you clearly laid out the advantages that you have, the flexibility, the possibility, to create new scenarios and be really interactive with people. Since you work in the medical field, and so facts and reliable facts and answers are key. And we all know that AI still tends to fabricate, come up with, answers and make up answers if there are no facts available. So I think this is a big topic. But how did you tackle this?
I'm going to take this, Carlo, if you don't mind. The answer is very easy. Everything that the avatars say, we decide. So there's no possibility that they can come up with things that are not true. And that is because of the dashboard that we built, the AutoKiosk portal. We can inject strings of text in a way that whenever avatars are generated, they say things that we want them to say. And we also make it so that whenever in the user portal the videos are uploaded alongside subtitles, they are checked in a way. So we have several layers of features that enable us to check what is being said so that we don't mess it up. And so far, we've never had any issue. So consider this almost like the avatars are split into modules, and depending on the module, they say something, but they can say something else if a certain condition occurs. And throughout this whole process, we have the end-to-end control of what they're saying. So
It's not an open system. It's not web-based. It's basically like a modular interaction with an limited amount of possibilities that you've preset.
And it's completely controllable. So
yes, we are using AI just as an interface, a human interface for the final user, but everything that is said is controlled by us. So we are sure that everything that is said is correct.
And what should designers consider when designing for AI? Like as like related with just said, like also to have in mind everything.
Or maybe from your point of view, did anything change, when you're designing the product, let's say, with or without?
I think the world of AI is moving very fast, and not a lot of people are keeping up with the speed. But at the same time, we try our best to figure out if there's any advantages that we can take out of this because we like to be as advanced technologically speaking as possible within Amplifon X. It's more like a cultural thing. We're big nerds, so we just try to be up to speed with every kind of technology. So we did see some improvement design-wise because we could get some POCs much faster. But the more I personally try to use AI in ways that can benefit design, the more I realize that it's back to creativity. And human creative intelligence, I would like to say, because that's something I think AI will never be able to grasp upon. I've heard a talk about this exact topic by none other than a very famous actor who most people know as Batman. But he used to say something that I would never imagine him saying, which is that AI doesn't really stop. And it's when artists and designers and people who are creative in a way are very familiar with. And it's a big thing. I used to be a drawing addict. I used to draw a lot of things back in the day. I used to draw the entire time. And I knew that when a piece was finished, it was just finished. I didn't never had to continue. And the same goes with UX and design. I don't think AI is capable of bringing something to the essence and simplicity because it tries to overlap things. And the taste is not really something that it can understand on its own. It needs to be wired in and injected by designers and people who have that taste. So I think you can take as many designers as you want and get them to come up with the same product through only AI usage. I think you're going to see a lot of differences between them because it's taste that ultimately decides.
Thank you. I think
Thank
we would
you.
underwrite this, that in the end, the job of designers is to curate and to understand and to create meaning, and AI becomes a tool that enables this, but it can't be just yet, at least, and probably will never be able to understand the complexities that come into products that people use, and yeah, taste is also an important part of it.
Yes.
That said, I think we're getting to the end. I don't know if you have now another question or.
Totally fine. Nothing coming from the audience either.
So yeah, again, thank you very much, Carlo and Simone. It was wonderful talking to you. It was very interesting, and congrats for the presentation. It was really a deep dive.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you. It's been a pleasure.
Winning also congrats for winning the UX Design Awards in 2026.
Thank you on behalf of the entire Amplifon X team.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to remind that the open call for submissions is still open. It ends. The deadline is the 18th, next Monday, 18th of May. And yeah, stay tuned on all our events. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Instagram or our newsletter.
Yes, and wherever you are around the world, be it here in Europe, in Asia, Africa, the Americas, we have people watching us and have been watching us from all around the world. Have a wonderful day, evening, morning, wherever you are. And hopefully see you soon again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
And ciao to Italy.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.